How's it going, folks? So, I'm going to be responding to a comment on the previous video. I'm going to start off, dude. You know who you are. You claim you said that I claim that these people are not swayed by evidence. Yes, if you talk to gun controllers lately, your side of the aisle has a disproportionate number of people who don't know whether they're coming or going, don't know what the actual laws are, don't know what the actual numbers are, make claims like the AR-15 is a high-powered rifle, even though it's not. They base all their rhetoric and just emotionally charged language that has no substance whatsoever. Yeah. And then you claim, but then I go on to repeat unfounded talking points. That's not true. The fact of the matter is when I was talking about stuff like your claims about right to carry laws and shall issue when they were coming up initially, yes, your side of the aisle made those claims that there was going to be apocalyptic gun battles and blood on the street. None of those things arose or materialized. So, yeah, that's not an unfounded talking point. Mass killings. Yeah, you look at a good portion of them. When you actually start looking at it, the person who committed the mass killing did put some planning into it. There's evidence of that. So I don't know what unfounded talking point I said here. Ignore actual data, research, and expertise actually show. No, I didn't. That's something your side did. Moreover, I'm going to get into this a little bit later as well, but a lot of these things that you put out as studies are anything but that. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that gets labeled as studies and research that's intended to mislead people. Kellerman study, that's one of them. That's actually the one that kind of broke the straw. That was the straw that broke the camel's back when we got through an amendment prohibiting the CDC from financing gun violence research. Is because we realized that, hey, these people are funding hatchet jobs that they're labeling as research, intentionally misleading people into believing that owning firearms is more dangerous than it is. And moreover, denying there's actual benefits to it. So, no, I'm not ignoring what actual data and research or anything like that. The problem is that the actual data doesn't point to what your side of the aisle is claiming it does. So, moving on to the second paragraph. Start off with the first line. Your claim is that there's no real downside to more permissive carry rules. I never said that. What I did say is your restrictions on them do more harm than good. Sure, there might be a downside or two to more permissive carry rules, but that's outweighed by the benefits and the damage your more restrictive carry rules or prohibitions on carry, which is what your side really wants, does more harm than good. Um, let's start off with the second line. So, why are there so many studies showing that loosening concealed carry permits is linked to higher rates of gun crime and deadly violence? Well, those studies aren't really studies, they're more propaganda masquerading as research once you start actually digging into them. And I notice you use the word link, and that's another little game the gun controllers like you play. at least the ones that play the game of studies. You use the word linked, yeah, and associated with. It's a weasel word, and the fact that you're using these weasel words show that you yourselves know that you can't really say. And you use the word, quote, gun crime. Well, let me ask you this. Your friend comes home in a body bag. Do you care whether or not the murderer used a gun or a knife? You know, the whole term gun crime is there specifically, not to target actual crime, but just to target firearm ownership. It's a neurolinguistic trick that your side engages in constantly. You'll notice your side, even when you try to play the research game, engages in this dishonest behavior. And yes, I am talking to you with contempt at this point. Um, yes, you're being dishonest in this comment. Then you go, why is there no compelling research to show more guns in public reduces crime or makes things safer? Um, and so on and so on. Well, first off, my side of the aisle doesn't get that research funding because the people who are doing this aren't doing this to show, to find the truth. So anybody who might be coming out to say, wait, maybe there are benefits to concealed carry, immediately doesn't get funded. I mean, by the way, Lott did some pretty compelling research to show that more permissive concealed carry laws do tend to be a more of a deterrent to crime. But again, your side of the aisle wants to be intellectually dishonest about that, pretend that that doesn't exist. You have the DGU portion of it, which got removed from the CDC's data at your side's behest. And you can sit there and say, but those were estimates, and there's a wide variation. At least that's honest research, unlike what your side engages in. You see, the people putting up these estimates of DGUs actually show their methodology and admit right on its front that they're estimates. Your side is the one that's being dishonest about that. Your side is the one that's trying to mislead people when it gets down to that. And then you go on to say, here are just some of many studies proving my point. Now, I've clicked on, I've taken the very first one. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's all the same thing. Basically, what you've done is given the titles, and when you go to them, all you get is the abstract, which, you expect me to take that abstract and then say, oh, well, this is, completely good research, even though you can't see all the methodology and all that other stuff. They don't go into details of that. So basically, what you're doing is akin to, say, a creationist saying, well, here's Genesis. This proves the earth is only 6,000 years old. That's akin to what you're doing. But I am going to get into at least the abstract of the very first one. All right, so on the abstract, well, let's start off with the paragraph title Objectives. The way they frame it is exposes right there that they're on the gun control side and that this is probably going to be one of those things to where they're set it up to show what they want regardless of what the truth is. And the line is may issue laws which give law enforcement wide discretion over issue of concealed firearm carry permits or not. That is a gun controller talking point. the fact of the matter is with shall issue, you have a specific criteria you have to meet. Once you've met the criteria, you cannot be denied the permit. Um, Now, with may issue, you have a criteria you have to meet, but then they don't have to give you the permit. And unless you're well politically connected or you live in a very small town where everybody knows everybody and you're friends with a law enforcement officer that's signing off on it, there's a good chance you're not going to get issued that permit. And the fact of the matter is that may issue, it's really signing off on somebody or not signing off on somebody that you don't know. It doesn't, they have no way of knowing, in many cases, whether or not the person's a good person or a bad person or should not be issued that permit because the person signing off on him doesn't know them. You know, they leave that part out. And oftentimes, what that translates into in many cases is that, yeah, people who are well connected or give money to the reelection campaigns of certain sheriffs end up getting their permit. And by the way, that last one was not baseless. There's a county in California where the sheriff got flat out caught approving and denying a concealed carry permits based on whether or not the applicant donated to the reelection campaign. Does that sound very ethical for you to you? Does that sound like that's going to have a bearing on whether or not they're a criminal to you? I don't think so. Then you go into then they go into the methods, which is a broad base, which tells me nothing about the actual methods that they used. It doesn't go into details. So just on the methods paragraph alone, how do you know that their methodology is actually a sound methodology? You don't. And given the first paragraph, their language, I'm poised to be pretty distrustful of it, given the object bias to it. Okay, so then on the results, you'll notice in the results they specifically use the language associated with. Again, they can't even come up with a conclusion. So why should I accept that as a conclusion? All it says is associated with. And the reason why they don't use the word causation is because with causation, if they distinctly said causes, then at that point when somebody catches them up in that, then they've outright lied. Whereas if they say significantly associated with, well, that's a bit of a weasel word. And once you show the flaws and whatnot with this, well, they can say, well, we said associated with, so we weren't technically lying. Uh, so, conclusions. Now, this is what I want to get into. And they say, again, shall issue laws are associated with significantly higher rates of total firearm and handgun related homicides. Well, when it comes to the concealed carry permitting programs and laws, they only govern pistols, handguns. So, why are they including long guns into it? Moreover, here's one of many questions that may come to mind that call this whole entire study into question. We'll take two hypothetical realities. Reality one, Johnny gets his concealed carry permit. He goes home on a high crime area all the time, so he manages to get his concealed carry permit. Now, one day he comes home and a crazy person comes out with one of these and tries to kill Johnny. Maybe they're methed out. Maybe they just want to rob Johnny. Who knows? Who cares? They're unjustly trying to kill Johnny with one of these. In the first reality, obviously, he has his concealed carry permit and uses his pistol, shoots and kills his assailant. Reality B, or reality number two, whichever you want to call it. Johnny lives in a May issue state. Johnny does not get issued his concealed handgun license. So Johnny follows the law and doesn't carry home. That same crazy person comes out with one of these and hacks Johnny to death. In both cases, you wound up with a homicide. Only one of these cases is going to be shown on this study, and it's going to be shown in a negative light. Even though the other one was a far worse outcome. So you see what I mean with that. And if you don't think that the second outcome is not going to show up, read the conclusion yourself. It says firearm related. Quite frankly, even though the first one ended up with a homicide, and by the way, I've no indicator to on this to show whether or not they're including justifiable homicides in this as the bad homicide category. And quite frankly, it wouldn't matter because, well, it does matter, but what they do is they include a bunch of homicides that were actually justifiable, but ruled unjustifiable in the initial investigation. Even though, later in court they were ruled justifiable, what the initial investigation says is how they get ruled overall in the numbers. So again, this calls into question a lot of these pro gun control studies, is because the data they're using is flawed in that particular way. So, again, I've already shown you how the very first one you've shown is deeply flawed. And you know what? I imagine if I go through each and every one of these, and I'm not because I don't have the time to do so, I will find in each and every one of these cases, just off the top of my head, at least one major flaw, like I did with this one. So there you have it on that portion of it. So moving on past your list of seances, you then go on in the first line in this paragraph, you state, then you make some some claims about mass shootings. Um, why, and your question is basically why are so many seances, including those done by the FBI or DOJ, make it clear the primary motivation for mass shooters is picking their targets with personal locations, personal connections and all that other stuff. Well, the fact of the matter is that these guys target gun-free zones. By the way, for some reason, there are certain things like with Las Vegas where for some reason they couldn't figure out what the motives of the mass killer was. Have you heard of them? I sure haven't. But nonetheless, mass shooter picked a place to shoot from that had a no guns policy. And in fact, with these mass killings, they always seem to exclusively occur in places with the gun free zone policies, regardless of whether or not the person's lashing out at people who they have personal connections with. They tend to exclusively pick the gun-free zones. But the Nashville mass murderer, the one that targeted the Christian school, explicitly said in her notes, and I don't really give a damn that the person identified as a he, him. The fact of the matter is that they said in their notes they had two targets. The reason why they targeted the school they targeted was because there was no armed security at that school. And furthermore, when these mass killers do tend to strike, if there's somebody else there armed, their mass killing generally tends to get cut short, such as in the case at White Settlement. You notice how you don't hear a whole bunch of that from the mass media. That happened a few years ago. Basically, one of the congregation members stopped a mass shooter before he could rack up a body count. Then you had the incident in Indiana, the Greenwood Park Mall, I believe it was, where you had somebody who recently started carrying because the permitting requirement had been repealed. This person also stopped a mass killer. And your side of the aisle were showing more condemnation towards the fact that these people used firearms to stop mass killers than you were the actual mass killers themselves. You know, you expect people like me to take you in good faith, your side in good faith, when your side actually has an incident where a mass killer was stopped with somebody with a firearm. You would think if their objective really was stopping mass killings, you would think they would stop and say, you know what? It's good that the mass killing was stopped. We don't care that, the guy used a firearm or not. But no, they were more upset that the person used a firearm to stop a mass killing than they were at the mass killer themselves. And the fact of the matter is my side of the aisle has been saying for a while now that, hey, these mass killings tend to take place in gun-free zones. Maybe what we should do is have more people carrying. Maybe we should not be stopping these people from carrying in these places and making them attractive targets to mass killers. Maybe, or I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt in this portion of it. Maybe we shouldn't have gun-free zones because somebody might lash out at the people in that area. And at least the people in that area, if at least one of them is armed, they have a better chance of preventing that body count from being racked up. But your side doesn't want to get into that. Your side would rather pretend people using firearms to protect their lives didn't even exist. So you're sitting there accusing me of being intellectually dishonest, yet you're doing exactly what you accuse me of doing. So there you have it on that one. So I'm going to wrap this up on the last paragraph. I know I've touched on some of the last paragraph earlier in the video. Yes, I did read the comment before I started the video. The last paragraph after all of this is really what exposes the bad faith of this comment. This person says in your video, you talk about how it's the gun controllers who are blind to evidence. Yes, they are. When somebody goes around and says stuff like, the AR-15 is a high-powered rifle. The 5.56 will blow a deer in half. The 5.56 will turn children into mush. These are all lies. The fact that these people are using this, yeah, it shows that they are blind to evidence, or at least don't care what the evidence is. And you have a ton of gun controllers that are talking about that they rely on inflammatory rhetoric. So Yeah, when you do that, you're blind to evidence. Then, when you sit there and commission propaganda masquerading as studies, and you throw out giving this study all the benefits you can, just being deeply flawed research that should be discarded. Yeah, that says that your side of the aisle is blind to the evidence. So, um, what does it mean to me? It means that your side of the aisle doesn't have a case whatsoever, doesn't have a leg to stand on, and you keep doing this shit in order to deceive people. You slap the scientific label on what should be laughed off is just, at best, again, a clown trying to perform scientific research, you know? And quite frankly, at worst, well, maybe not at worst, but the more likely solution is that this is an attempt to deceive people into buying into gun control. And this is not a baseless statement for me to make at all. You've had people like Eric Holder who've gotten up and outright said, hey, our goal is to really brainwash people into looking at guns in a different way. You've openly got people in high places in the US government that seem to think it's acceptable to do that. Eric Holder is not some fringe gun controller. He was the attorney general for Obama when Obama was president. So, and you go on to say, will you be intellectually honest and perhaps reconsider your views in light of strong evidence? You didn't present strong evidence. And this claim of, will you be intellectually honest? I have been intellectually honest, unlike the people you have been citing. When I can sit there and just take the abstract and hold it in the best face possible and say, hey, look, we have event A and event B. How would this study look at both event A and event B? Reality, event A is the more positive outcome, event B is the more negative outcome. This study flips them both around. What does that tell you about that study? Anyway, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from commenting. Dude, you came at this with some really bad faith at this point. And unfortunately, with this being said, I'm not trying to be a dick to you. But, when you play these games right here, I find that contemptible. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from commenting. Please do feel free to comment on my video. It does bring up some room for discussion. Normally, I'm not able to get to it right away. I don't normally have a bunch of time on my hands. Today, I had a little bit of time to cover this, and I quite frankly saw this, and it needed to be addressed. And the fact that I am addressing it shows that I am concerned about this type of mentality. I think this type of mentality puts a scientific face to, quite frankly, what is misleading. And maybe I am being a little hard on terminology here. That is a possibility too, but the reason why I'm doing it is because I think that terminology is smart enough to know the difference and chooses to go about it in this way, which It is really a shame, but it is what it is. Thank you all for watching. Y'all have a great day out there. And again, y'all still have the comments.